What is going on, gunfighters? Are you excited about a brand new episode of Gunfighter Life? By God's grace, I got an idea for a lot of episodes. State of this caliber in 2024. Just kind of like the State of the Union address, but for a caliber. What's the state of, 9mm in 2024? What's the state of, 5.56, 308, 40 Smith & Wesson? I don't know if I'm going to do all those calibers, but you get the idea. I'm excited to get you guys some new content because I've been doing a lot of tactical reload episodes because I've been professionally gunfighting to make some money while this podcast, God willing, becomes a full-time income. If you want to make that happen, if you want to be part of that, check out the Patreon link in the show notes. With that, welcome to Gunfighter Life, where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics, calibers, the right way with Almighty God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. Let's hit up this bio, and then we'll get into the main topic. First and foremost, I am a Christian. I don't apologize for that. God is number one in my life. I grew up hunting and fishing in the backwoods of the southeastern United States at a very early age. Some of my earliest memories are with firearms. I joined the Marine Corps at 17, did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. By God's grace, He got me through that safely. After that, I served as an instructor, an urban warfare instructor, and a desert warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps. I also served with the LAPD, both full-time as a sworn police officer and some more specialized assignments, as well as serving in the U.S. Army, full-time and part-time National Guard. I've been a FBI firearms instructor, still am an FBI firearms instructor, have been for a lot of years. Also NRA certified and some other three-letter government agency certified. I've been a private contractor for a three-letter government agency I won't specify. I've been the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. By God's grace, He got me through all that in one piece, not because I'm better, but because He chose to have grace and mercy on me. I've been a professional hunter and guide. Professionally hunted things like buffalo and elk. Not many people today can say they've done that, but I'm blessed to be able to say that I have. I've hunted everything from white-tailed deer on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast to gray squirrel on the East Coast to prairie dog on the West Coast and elk and bear and wolf and slain all manner of beast. A state rifle and pistol champion a few times over in a few different disciplines. Now those experiences, it's not because I'm bigger or badder. Certainly not bigger. In fact, I met one of the patrons in real life, and he said something to the effect of, "I thought you'd be bigger." Reminded me of that William Wallace movie, where he's like, "Oh yeah, if William Wallace were here, he'd shoot lightning bolts out of his rear end." Well, I'm not William Wallace, but I am the person that did all those things in the bio. But not because I'm bigger or badder. I don't think that I survived when many other young good men did not. I give all the glory and all the credit to God, all the talents and experiences that He's given me and the things that He's let me live through. I hope to use them to glorify God and to help you today. So if I boast in anything, it's not in my strength, it's in that God had mercy on me and saved me because He had a purpose for me. And hopefully I can use those talent, skills, and abilities to serve you today. What is going on, gunfighters? This installment, State of the Cartridge Address. This cartridge, today, you probably know because you clicked on it, unless you're just listening in, automatic mode, one right after another. The 380. The little cartridge that could. The 380 has a long and storied history. It is older than the 1911. It is older than the 45 ACP. It is right, and you'd have to do some serious research as to when they were developed, when they were adopted, when they were first fired out of a gun. Whenever you consider the first, right? Do you consider a cartridge invented when it was first created in a lab, when it was first sold in a box, when it was first shot out of a gun. But it was right around the same time as the 9mm. The 380 ACP stands for automatic Colt pistol, much like the 45 ACP stands for automatic Colt pistol. It has been around a long, long time. You kind of think of it like this. Like if you had a group of buddies back when you were rowdy, running around, getting in fights, it maybe wasn't the guy riding in the front seat. Maybe wasn't the guy that was, ready to fight all the time. Wasn't the guy that was like instigating, going toe to toe. But he was the buddy kind of in the back seat, hanging out. And if things got really hairy, he'd throw a haymaker here or there. He was good. If the chips were really, really down, you could count on him. That's kind of the 380 ACP. Never really a front runner for fighting. Some European police agencies and stuff, I do believe, actually used it, but it was always kind of relegated in my mind, at least since I've been alive, to second-tier defensive cartridge. And it ebbs and flows. It goes here or there. It waxes and wanes. I remember about 10, 15 years ago, it saw a bit of a resurgence with the really thin, slim 380s, like the Cars, like that's Car with a K. With the Smith & Wesson Bodyguard, that was big amongst cops as a backup gun. And then the Smith & Wesson Shield kind of came on the market, and we kind of don't think about this, but I was around at the time, and that was kind of I don't say game changer lightly, but kind of a game changer. You had a really small, compact, shootable 9mm handgun. The Car, I guess, was first, but a lot of people have a hard time with that long double-action trigger. But that really gave you an option besides the, J-frame 38s and much smaller than a Walther PPK or PPKS that was in 380, but in 9mm. So after that, you started to see that take up a bit of the market share when you could get a gun that small. And we think of like the 365 today, but the Shield was quite a bit before that. And I love Smith & Wesson M&Ps. And I adopted them really early on. And if you guys don't know, I've done the vast majority of my competition wins with a Smith & Wesson M&P. And they were probably the best polymer striker-fired handgun on the market for years. But in my opinion, they kind of fell into a stagnation that many manufacturers do. They get something good, and they don't innovate, much like Glock. They get something good, and they may do some minor changes here or there. Just a brief aside, I think I still like the Gen 1 M&Ps better than the Gen 2s. They're still a good gun, but there's a lot of other good guns that have come on the market to kind of steal some of the thunder of both the Glock and the M&P. But getting back to the main point, the Shield kind of dug into the 380 sales because that was a gun that was really small in size, a pocket-sized handgun in 9mm that was shootable, that had good ergonomics. Heretofore, kind of a rarity amongst the carry public. And it came right at about the right time when carry was becoming a lot more popular. Even 10, 20 years ago, concealed carry was not nearly as common or not nearly as allowed. As much as we get down about people trying to take away our Second Amendment rights, let's rejoice in that win that the vast majority of states have concealed carry of some form or another that's actually attainable. There are a few that don't, but the vast majority do. That has not always been the case, even in my adult lifetime. And I don't consider myself that old. Sure, I had a mullet and a fanny pack back in the day. I might have owned a pair of parachute pants, believe it or not, when I was a kid. But I'm not that old, guys. It's not been that long since we've made some big strides in concealed carry. And it came around that same time. So with all that said, where's the 380 stand today? Well, like I alluded to in the beginning, it's like that buddy in the back seat. It's not the front runner. It's not your first choice, hopefully. And if you consider yourself a gunfighter, I hope that you don't consider 380 your first choice for a defensive firearm. I hope that you consider it like what you carry when you can't carry your normal carry gun. So I think that's where it stands today, a second tier. And it still can be had in quite a bit smaller package than even most small 9mm. If you look at something like the Glock 42, you would say, why would you carry a Glock 42 when you could carry a Glock 43? Well, on paper, it may only look like fractions of an inch smaller, thinner, lighter, a couple of ounces, but when you actually hold them side by side, it is not an insignificant difference. If you look at percentage-wise, if you did like a water displacement test in a beaker of water and you dumped in a Glock 42, disassembled it if you had to, and dumped all the parts in there, or melted it down into blobs and dumped it in there and melted a Glock 43 down into blobs and dumped it in there, I would imagine as a percentage that Glock 43 is going to displace quite a bit more water than the Glock 42. You may be in a situation where you can carry the Glock 42, but you are not able to carry the Glock 43. And there are many others like it. The Beretta Pico, really small. I think even smaller than the Glock 42. Double check that, but really small and thin. If you talk about the cars of yesteryear, they're still around, but the cars, if you look at a car 380 and a car 9mm, both are small and compact semi-autos, but the 380 is quite a bit smaller. So if you absolutely can't carry something else, and thin is important because I have an 11 point something ounce 357 Magnum. So weight is not really the issue. I don't know of any 380s that are really lighter than that. The Kel-Tecs may be a little bit lighter, actually, but not by much, and that's a 5-shot 357 Magnum. But those are a lot thinner, depending on how you want to carry. They're a good backup gun. They're a good gun, if you're out doing wind sprints, out jogging, whatever, and you can't carry a bigger gun. And the reason I say if you can carry something bigger, let's talk about the ballistics a little bit of the 380. We might, if you look at them side by side, if you hold them in your hands next to a 9mm, it's like a 9x19 and a 9x17. You're like 2 millimeters. That's not a lot. The difference is not actually in the size of the cartridge, but there is a difference there for sure. There's a couple of millimeters difference, and they're the same diameter bullet, even though it's called a 380 and a 9mm. Both are .355 diameter bullets. Generally, you can get a .356 if you're casting lead, but that's pretty rare. Anyway, it's .355 diameter for both. However, in general, and they're you can get up and down in both calibers, but in general, 9mm is going to go from 115 grain to 147. And your 380 is going to be somewhere in the 90-ish grain range. So it's a lighter bullet. Also, again, not so much the outer diameter of the cartridges, but the pressures. A modern plus P 9mm is up in the I think in the high 30,000s of PSI, and the 380 is in the 20-something thousand PSI. That's quite the difference. And foot-pounds is not the entire equation. Foot-pounds is not the whole answer. Foot-pounds is not everything. Foot-pounds does not equate to effectiveness on target, but foot-pounds can give us a rough idea. If you look at a hot, stout 9mm load, like a NATO load, 124 grain plus P in that high 30,000s, you're getting right around 400 foot-pounds. Probably not there, but just shy of 380, 300, and, high 300 and some foot-pounds of energy. The 380 is generally hovering in the 200 and something foot-pounds of energy. So, although they might not look that different in size, they are quite different in their actual power. So don't think that it's almost as good as. It's not. But it is, again, it's a good standby. It's a good backup option if you cannot have a 9mm, a 45, something like that, a Smith & Wesson J-frame. I would even you might argue and say that 380 is better than 38 Special, but I think ballistically, a decent 38 Special round, even a standard pressure 38 Special round with a much heavier payload, I would take. That said, the 380 can get the job done. It has been getting the job done for over 100 years, and it continues to get the job done. And if it's what you have, it is not the worst option ever. Not all 380s are the little teeny tiny micro super slim guns that I'm talking about. They're just what's most common today. There has been for a long time, like the old 1903s, obviously by the name, they've been around a long time. Also the Walther PPK, PPKS, those are not a very small gun. They're what I consider like a compact size gun. They're not small by today's standards. They were a good go-to carry gun at the time. But they're pretty big for a 384 today. And they're this Beretta 84. It's probably the most sweet shooting that I'm aware of in the 380 world. So those might be a decent option if you just, for some reason, want one of those instead of a real small 380. And actually, I would like to see that trend continue, because I think a lot of people buy what's on paper. If they actually went out and shot side by side with the amount that they train, I think they'd find they're more effective even with a less effective cartridge with lower recoil, that they can get consecutive hits on target. And I would rather have somebody be able to get fast consecutive hits on target with a 380 rather than, one of these smaller 9mm and have to adjust their grip every time. So I would like to see more in the realm of like a Glock 19 size gun, but in 380. And you might think, well, that's silly if I can get it in 9, but recoil is a thing. And there's a lot of good, effective rounds in 380 now, which I'll get to. But I would like to see more mid-size guns, maybe even full-size guns in 380. I don't think it will be much of an engineering hurdle. Talk about innovation to get like a full-size Smith & Wesson M&P in 380 instead of the Shield is a good gun. The EZ is a good gun in 380, but even a full-size gun in 380 for somebody that wants, a full-size handgun and ergonomics, a woman that's going to carry in her purse that doesn't care about how small it is, that will shoot it a lot better in 380. And it's still got the center fire ballistics. It's still got the reliability, as opposed to like a rimfire that doesn't have as much. So that's what I would like to see in the future for 380. As it stands right now, though, 380 has come a long way, much like 9mm. A 9mm good defensive round is much better than a 9mm 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's the same caliber, and you fire out of the same gun, but there's been a lot of advancements in modern handgun projectile technology. Mostly projectile, some in the powder, some in like the low flash stuff, some in like the nickel-plated cases, but really the bread and butter is the construction of the bullet. Talking about bonded bullets, talking about some kind of placeholder in the hollow cavity of the projectile to stop it from getting clogged. Some kind of elastic rubber type tip. You see that in a lot of projectiles. You see a really good repeatable platform in the ballistics gel. We take that for granted. That hasn't always been a thing that we test all our loads to see how good they do as far as balancing penetration and expansion. But again, it's not as good as 9mm, but it's come a long way. 380 has come a long way. I would say it's come from being a pretty poor choice to a marginal choice, and marginal being optimistic, but it's still there, I think. I think it's marginal. And I would never recommend this generally for human-on-human self-defense and bigger calibers. If we're talking about something else, maybe. But 380 may be one of the ones for shooting out of a super short barrel that you might look at. And now, take a deep breath. And you may disagree with me, and that's fine. But FMJs or some other kind of, flat-fronted bullet that's not expanding. Because if you get that bullet expanding, it may not penetrate enough. And I would rather have the penetration minus the expansion than vice versa. But you make that choice for yourself. 380 is right on the cusp. And a few years ago, I would have really recommended that. But today, again, there's been a lot of advancements in bullet technology. So I would say, not necessarily. Do your research on your gun, your barrel length. Is the bullet even going to expand? You may decide that. Also, I'm not really on board, sold as of yet on these screwdriver type rounds, and there are a lot of different ones. Extreme Defender, Extreme Penetrators. You know the ones I'm talking about. They look like a Phillips head screwdriver. But of all the things that are intriguing, they're the most intriguing to me, I think, in a 380. Because again, you start getting bullet expansion. That's a direct inverse relationship to penetration. When it expands, more frontal diameter, less penetration. The screwdriver type bullets don't do that. So they're the most intriguing to me in a 380. So that's something I'm not saying they're the best. I'm not even saying you should pick them. I'm saying they're the most intriguing to me in that caliber. Because why would I do that when there's so many good street-proven, credible rounds in 9mm and 45? But in 380, again, it's more intriguing to me. So, in short, I guess a 380 is here to stay. As much as people might like something like Super 30 carry or 30 Super Carry or something else to take over, I don't really see it happening. I see it kind of staying in that back seat, like a back seat, backup fighting buddy to the main fighters in the group. And I don't see it going away. It's been around over 100 years, and I see it staying, pretty solidly in that backseat position. I see it, holding a pretty good market share for backup guns, for law enforcement, for civilians that want a backup gun, or a secondary carry gun when you're doing a lot of work and you can't have your primary carry gun. I hope that a 380 is not your primary carry, unless there's some other caveat. Like, that's absolutely the only thing you can have. But I would encourage you to carry something else most of the time and have that as a backup if your backup's not something else like a smaller 9 or even a J-frame 38 special. But that is my thoughts on the state of the 380 in 2024. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you enjoy this series. I will hopefully continue, God willing, to chug along with different cartridges. Your tactical tip of the day. We talk mostly about defense and defensive handguns, but I'm big on kind of the duality of survival. The subtitle of this podcast is Survival Guns, at least now unless I change it again. But hunting. You might not be thinking of hunting right now unless you're deep into Turkey and it's open where you are, but now is the time. Now is a good time. The whole rest of the year. If you want to be a successful hunter, get out in the woods now. Get out in the woods throughout the year. Now, caveat, I know if you live east of the Mississippi, there's all kinds of ticks and Lyme disease and alpha-gal and all that stuff. But do what you can there. But if you can, get out now. Get out throughout the year. Don't just wait until a week before hunting season to go scouting. Plus, you get to be out in God's beautiful creation and enjoy that. So that's your tactical tip of the day. Start getting ready for hunting now just by being out and about and checking out new areas if you can, assuming you live somewhere with public land and you don't hunt on the same 40 acres. Go exploring. Go do that now. The weather's getting nice. Probably if you're like me, getting stir crazy from being cooped up in the winter. Get out there and get after it. Your tactical verse of the day. Rejoice always. Pray continually. Give thanks in all circumstances. For this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus.